Digital Devil Story by Nishitani, Ayani Shidani, Aya Reincarnation of the Goddess. Prologue Chapter 1. This story takes place 18 years ago, when most people did not even know of the existence of the internet, and personal computers were normally thought of as standalone devices. In the town called Kuniritsu, a suburb of Tokyo, there was a school known as Jusho High. Everything began in this school one day when a tall student burst into the classroom, as if he was just waiting for class to end. Yu Nakajima, the tall student, stormed over to the seat of Nakajima Akemi, a handsome young man who stood out amongst the rest of his class, and slammed the top of the desk as if to threaten him. Yes, that's me. Ignoring the sudden vibration that the desk sent through his body, Nakajima stood up resolutely and looked the student in the eye. It was Kondo Hiroyuki, the captain of the karate club and the unofficial boss of Jusho High among the students. In the past he had forced more than one student that had dared to oppose him to change schools, usually through violent means. But Nakajima had never even interacted with Kondo before. He certainly couldn't think of anything that he might have done to make him this angry. What gives? I haven't done anything. Nakajima gulped and started to open his parched mouth to speak. At that moment, he heard a suppressed giggle from behind him. Turning his head, Nakajima saw a bewitchingly charming girl, one that almost seemed too old to be a student, staring at him like a cat with a gaze that was alluring and at the same time full of malice. It was Takamizawa Kyoko, one of his classmates. All of a sudden, Nakajima understood everything. Hold on a minute. The same instant Nakajima spoke, a fist went flying into his solar plexus. Without even a chance to cry out, Nakajima spun to the floor, as Kondo followed up his punch with a low kick. That was followed by two kicks to both the chest and the lower stomach, carefully placed with enough force to hurt badly but not knock their target out. Nakajima's classmates, afraid of getting involved, started to leave the classroom one by one. Hear me out. Nakajima tried hard to protest, but his voice was silenced as Kondo's foot went flying into his mouth, and his tears and saliva spilled out all over the floor. I don't wanna hear your excuses. You gotta learn what happens to people who come onto Kyoko. Kondo kicked Nakajima in the back, knocking him onto his stomach on the ground. Kyoko, who all the meantime was gleefully watching him get pummeled, kneeled down and frowned. Him and flicked his upper lip with her fingers. He's got a face like a woman, yet he dared to try and kiss me. Liar. In actuality, it was Kyoko who tried to kiss him, and Nakajima had just pushed her away. After having her pride hurt, Kyoko used Kondo, who had a large crush on her, to get her revenge. But Nakajima didn't have a single friend to corroborate his story. Only his classmate Takai Kenichi remained in the room, and even he just stood there looking worriedly at Nakajima through dark green-rimmed glasses, apparently not having the courage to stop Kondo. Pulling Nakajima up from the floor easily with just his left hand, Kondo thrust his right fist into Nakajima's solar plexus again. The pain felt almost as if his heart was being torn out, and Nakajima tried to cry out. But with the wind knocked out of him, he could neither inhale nor exhale, and all that left his injured lips was a pathetic little moan. Nakajima had always been something of an independent maverick, not wanting to hurt anyone or get hurt himself, so he had never been beaten like this before. And to think that it was over some stupid reason like rejecting a girl. The combined sensations of pain, anger, and humiliation overwhelmed Nakajima, and the wound in his psyche started to bleed a drop at a time. Seeing him like this, Kyoko watched Nakajima with a look of pure ecstasy in her eyes, and laughed out loud. The sound of her high-pitched laugh reverberating throughout the classroom pierced Nakajima's eardrums and echoed in his skull, awakening an emotion he had never experienced before deep within him. Damn you. I'll get you. You won't get away with this. Nakajima's eyes lit up with a fierce, violent look he had never shown before. What's with that look? Kondo was taken aback for a second by Nakajima's expression, and as if mad at himself for faltering, he punched Nakajima hard in the face. As the crunch of Nakajima's tooth cracking sounded, Kyoko said, "Hey, don't you think that's enough?" As if she had lost interest in the whole thing. It was the voice of a dirty, cowardly woman, worried only about protecting herself. If Nakajima was beaten any harder, there would be a real danger of her being held responsible. Hey, lucky you. Looks like you've gotten a reprieve. I've gotta say I'm surprised at what a weak little runt you are. Beating you up was just a waste of energy. Twisting his mouth into a smile, Kondo unceremoniously dumped Nakajima's body on the floor like a rag doll. An hour later, after finally being able to move, Nakajima reached the Chuo-sen Kunitake train station, supported by Takai Kenichi. Why don't we sit down? While propping up Nakajima, Takai cocked his head in the direction of two open seats next to each other nearby. Oh, sure. Nakajima collapsed onto the seat and stared forward resolutely, all the while regretting he had ever applied to his school. Jusho Private High was a famous and prestigious school, and every year more than 20 of its students were admitted to Tokyo University. However, anyone that was familiar with the way the school worked would have to acknowledge the extreme stratification amongst the students. The school was divided into two classes, the general class and the gifted class, which received better facilities, a better curriculum, better teaching materials, and in general were favored much more highly. The gifted class, which comprised only about 20% of the student body, was always the target of constant jealousy and disgruntlement from the general class. With such a gulf between the classes, the violent incidents that came about from this jealousy were to an extent unavoidable. Both Nakajima and Takai were part of the gifted class. With his slender frame and delicate looks, if Nakajima swapped his uniform for a girl's sailor suit, he might very well be able to pass for a beautiful teenage girl. Takai's appearance on the other hand was almost the polar opposite. He had a rugged body and thick fingers built up from judo practice, which he had started in junior high. But his personality was not as tough as his exterior, and when he put on his dark green-rimmed glasses, he looked almost like a child. That Kondo, he seemed even worse than usual today. Takai spoke almost as if making excuses. He felt a little guilty for not stepping in to help Nakajima. Nakajima raised an eyebrow and responded half-heartedly. His energy doubles whenever he's near a woman. What the heck is someone like Kyoko doing in the gifted class anyway? Besides, you'd never come on to her in the first place. Actually, it was the other way around. So it was Kyoko that got rejected then. Takai nodded as if everything suddenly made sense. Lots of girls were interested in Nakajima, but none of them so far had been able to strike his fancy. Seeing his indifference, Takai always guessed that Nakajima must have extremely finicky tastes when it came to women. The two sat next to each other in silence as the train passed through Musashi Sakai Station. Takai took a sidelong glance at Nakajima's profile. Among the students of the gifted class, Nakajima's grades were not particularly high. In contrast to Takai, who got good grades in just about everything, Nakajima was really only good at math and science. In the more liberal arts, the only subject he showed real strength in was world history. He wasn't much an athlete either. However, when it came to computers, nobody in school came even close to being as good as Nakajima, not even the teachers. Takai thought that you probably wouldn't be able to find someone who was as good as Nakajima in that arena if you searched all of Japan, let alone the school. The games that Nakajima would whip up in a matter of days were fantastic. No matter how popular they were, commercial games just seemed boring after playing one of Nakajima's. Sometimes Nakajima's expression looked positively mad as he hunched over one of the terminals writing programs in the school's kite computer-aided instruction room, his fingers flying across the keyboard. If I'm a prodigy, then Nakajima must be a bona fide genius. Takai nodded to himself as his gaze turned back to the scenery passing by outside the window. Demons, eh? The words tumbled out of Nakajima's mouth suddenly. No, never mind. Did you just as Takai pursed his lips as if to say something, the train arrived at Nishiogi Kubo Station. See you. Nakajima started to walk down the station stairs with his shoulders hunched and a brooding expression on his face. Geez, what is he thinking? Turning away from Nakajima, Takai plopped himself down on the two now empty seats of the train. Chapter 2. Behind the shopping district, a banner reading, "Lots for sale," hung from a newly built apartment building. Nakajima walked ahead, looking downwards while continuously moving his lips. To any passerby, he might have appeared like an ordinary high school student, deep in concentration trying to memorize something for a test. But those few people that caught a fragment of the words he was speaking turned around and gave him suspicious looks. That was because they sounded like the low and hostile muttering of a dark spell, and not at all something that you would expect to hear from a high school student. A cherry blossom fell from the nearby concrete wall and hit Nakajima's cheek, but he ignored it and kept walking, his eyes cast down to the ground. When he finally looked up, he was standing in front of a conspicuously tall apartment building. Placing his electronic key into the keyhole, the solid plate glass automatic doors slid open with a heavy sound. The entrance to the building was made from extravagant imported Canadian marble, but still seemed somewhat artificial. Stepping inside, Nakajima took a deep breath and straightened up. Nakajima entered the elevator and pressed the button to the 13th floor. With the change in air pressure, his body started to hurt, reminding him of the unpleasant events of the afternoon. A copper plaque with the word, Nakajima, engraved on it was affixed to the door to apartment 1302. Nakajima pressed the doorbell, but there was no response. Sighing, he unlocked the door. Opening the door and going inside, Nakajima took off his shoes, threw them aside randomly, and headed to the bathroom. The injured lip of the face looking back at him in the mirror had swollen up like a balloon, and was quite unpleasant to look at. His left cheek had a yellowish bruise on it as well. After looking at himself in the mirror for a bit, Nakajima abruptly turned on the faucet and splashed his face with the water that came pouring out. Returning to the living room and collapsing on the sofa, he noticed a memo on the side table. "I'm going to be late at a meeting. Heat up your dinner in the microwave." Nakajima crumpled up the note without reading it to the end. If you're just going to write the same old excuse, you might as well just photocopy the thing. After Nakajima's father was transferred to the branch office in Los Angeles, his mother had become more and more involved in her job as a designer. Sometimes she wouldn't get home till the middle of the night. Picturing his mother's face, Nakajima's smoldering anger suddenly flared up. Right at that moment, the telephone rang. Of course, it was probably for his mother. Glaring at the ringing phone, Nakajima opened the door to his room. Nakajima's room was quite dreary, without a single poster or decoration. With the exception of the one with the window, the walls were filled with large steel bookshelves that stretched to the ceiling. The bookshelves had anime magazines and comic books, much like one would expect to find in a high school student's room, but one corner seemed starkly out of place. That shelf was filled with books on magic and sorcery with titles like The Book of the Dead and Narcotic Manuscripts. On top of his steel desk sat a fully decked-out computer, and sitting next to it was a general-purpose book on magic called The New Golden Dawn Theory. From the look of the wear on the leather cover, it was clear that the book had seen a lot use. Nakajima pulled his chair out from the desk and sat down in front of the display. Turning on the switch on the side of his speakers, the vocals of David Coverdale filled the room. Nakajima's fingers started flying over the keyboard. Greater than entering the command, a very long program scrolled down the screen. Following the program list with sharp eyes, Nakajima started tapping the keys with a flowing rhythm. Nakajima first became interested in magic when he had the opportunity to read The New Golden Dawn Theory. While the book was poorly written, and the interpretation therein was clumsy and unskillful, Nakajima read through the whole thing regardless. While the world of magic held an appeal that hid a dark and sinister side, it also showed a rational and scientific realism to it as well. While rereading passages that seemed too unusual to him 2 or 3 times over, Nakajima had made a sudden realization that was almost like an epiphany. Magical theory and computer theory were surprisingly similar. At first glance, the two worlds did not seem to have any connection to each other. However, the similarities between them had been discovered by both magic and information technology researchers long before Nakajima. Charles Feed, a professor at MIT, a school famous for its study of artificial intelligence, was one of those researchers. Nakajima had immediately become a member of his group, ISG. International Satanist Garden, and for the past few months, Nakajima had been immersed in writing a program to summon demons, the idea for which he had thought up himself. It was almost complete. Nakajima had already finished the core part of the program. All he had to do now was add a few subroutines and it would be finished. But until yesterday, Nakajima had had reservations about finishing the project to completion. If his theory was correct, the program would definitely call a demon into the world. But up until this point, Nakajima couldn't think of any particular reason to summon a demon. He wouldn't even know what to make it do. But the events of the day had given him a clear, simple goal. I feel a little sorry for you, but you're going to be the subject of a little experiment. Nakajima started creating his final subroutines. Use data addresses 3780-39904, Toad's legs. Put this in the buffer, and before displaying the result, chant the spell. Yod, doer, dar, set. Wonder what this spell means. Picking up the modem receiver, Nakajima called Arkham in Massachusetts to connect with ISG's host computer. As the connection picked up, his computer's display filled with the image of the demon Lucifer. Calling up the AI, Kraft, and explaining the situation, he asked about the spell. Nakajima's English was not particularly good, so several times the only thing that appeared on screen were question marks. Greater than okay, I understand. Finally, Kraft appeared to have gotten it. Nakajima asked the AI what the spell meant. Greater than perhaps it's only a counter. Kraft's response probably indicated that the spell was only a time counter. Greater than thank you, Kraft. Cutting the connection to ISG, Nakajima set himself to the task of writing the subroutine once again. 2 hours later, there was a knock on his door. Come on in. With a hint of irritation in his voice, Nakajima responded to the knock without taking his eyes off the program list on screen. Did you eat dinner? Nakajima didn't respond, and just kept typing on the keyboard. Oh, what happened to your lip? Nakajima's mother bent down from behind him to take a good look at his face. I ran into the goalpost playing soccer. Nakajima stopped typing and looked back at his mother. Nakajima had a strong resemblance to his mother, who was a beautiful woman with a slender face. When they were together, they would frequently be mistaken for siblings. When it came to her son's education, she was very conservative. She wanted him to get into Keio University's medical school. Of course, there were too many blemishes on his academic record for that to ever happen. Shouldn't you put some medicine on it? It's okay, Mom. It's not serious. Irritated at his programming being interrupted, Nakajima absent-mindedly tapped keys at random on the keyboard. Beep. The computer made a harsh tone, and an error message appeared on screen. As if realizing that her son wasn't going to pay her any heed, Nakajima's mother left the room as if giving up. That night, at 3 a.m. All right, it's done. Nakajima slapped his thighs with his hands and stood up from his chair. Greater than Runth disk drive started whining, and bizarre letters blinked on and off the screen. But in less than 5 minutes, the screen displayed an error message and stopped. Greater than out of memory. If there wasn't enough memory for the program, it was probably either because the program itself was too long, or because it dealt with more variables than the machine could handle. No big deal. One little computer isn't enough to run a program like this anyway. If I use the school's host computer, it should have more than enough memory. Nakajima's eyes glittered with anticipation. Chapter 3. Later that week, at 7 p.m. on Saturday, Professor Iida, who was on night watch, noticed that there was someone in the Kai room and opened the door. Who's here at a time like this? At the sound of his voice, a student looked up from one of the Kai terminals, his face glowing strangely in the reflected light of the display. Iida's expression softened. Oh, it's just you, Nakajima. What are you doing in here with all the lights off? Nakajima's academic record was far from perfect, but his genius had endeared him somewhat to the math and science teachers and earned their trust. My program's just not working out the way I wanted to. But I'm almost done fixing it. Nakajima's voice seemed slightly metallic, as if in tune with the sound of the disk drive spinning. I'm always happy to see your enthusiasm, but you know that you need to ask permission in advance if you want to work in this classroom late at night. You're lucky that it was me that found you instead of someone else. Scolding Nakajima, Iida flicked on the light switch. What is this? Iida's shocked voice echoed through the now lit Kai room. A large geometric figure was drawn on the floor in white and red chalk, with Nakajima's seat situated at the center. It's a Solomon hexagram. Solomon. That has an occultish sound to it. Nakajima paid Iida's sarcasm no heed, and his fingers slid over the keys of the terminal. Presently the host computer located in the adjacent machine room sealed off by thick glass walls started to run. Great, the bugs are finally gone. It's done. After sending a print job to print out the contents of the program list, Nakajima stood and turned toward Iida. His girlish, almond eyes glittered in a demonic grin. The wound in his lip that he had gotten when Kondo beat him up had since sealed, but the excitement had reopened the cut, and a trickle of fresh blood stained his jaw. Ida's gaze became stern. All right, Nakajima, do you want to explain just what kind of program you're running on the host computer, and without permission, I might add. Nakajima brushed aside some hair from his forehead and responded nonchalantly. I've written a program that will summon demons. This hexagram is here to protect me from them. In just a moment a demon will appear. Professor, you should probably enter inside it too. You might get shredded to pieces otherwise. For an instant, Ida's mouth gaped open, and he took a long hard look at Nakajima. Have you lost it? Is it me who's lost it? Oh. Or the school. Professor, take a good look at me. This wound on my lip. The bruise on my face. I got the crap beaten out of me by Kondo from the karate club. Takamizawa Kyoko is just as guilty. The school just lets wild animals like that run free, and doesn't do anything to deal with them at all. No matter what happens to me in the classroom, the teachers and students just pretend it didn't happen. The violence that happens in this school is as plain as day, and yet nobody gets punished. I suppose the teachers are just waiting for students like that to graduate. As long as they keep their eyes shut, the calamity will just clear itself up on its own. They just have to endure it for 2 or 3 years. But this is the only time I get to be a high school student. I'm not going to let them just do whatever the hell they want anymore. I'm going to summon a demon and execute those annoying insects. Nakajima's speech seemed excited and his shoulders rose and fell in time with his wild breathing. Nakajima turned away from the stunned Iida and to the keyboard. Greater than run with the final command displayed on the monitor, the magnetic tape of the host computer started to gradually spin. Iida tried to yell at Nakajima and stop the computer. But the moment he opened his lips, a frigid breeze from nowhere struck him and covered his arms in goosebumps. Summoning demons with a computer, what a concept! Iida twisted his lips into a smile to hide his fear. Computer theory and magical thought have many overlapping similarities. I bet the first person who thought up the principles of computing was an alchemist or Kabbalist. It's not that well known, but things like spells, sacrifices, and thaumaturgic circles are very easy to put into binary format. Summoning a demon is just a transfer of the matter comprising the demon in the Azaluth world to the real Asiya world, and a computer is the perfect device to facilitate it. While Nakajima was explaining his theory, the cold air wrapped around Iida almost like a living creature, and a bizarre smell entered his nostrils. The lights of the classroom flickered out, and the Kai room plunged into darkness, the only sound that of the spinning disk drive. Presently the computer let out a low whine. Yod, hey, Vav, hey. To Ida's ears, the whine sounded like actual, real words. Yod, hey, Vav, hey. While whispering in sync with the computer, Nakajima continued to enter commands on the keyboard with unbelievable speed. Soon the entire room started to shake like an earthquake, and cracks formed in the windows. At same time, Nakajima entered his final command. Greater than kill. Kondo Hiroyuki, Takamizawa Kyokoida did not like students like Kondo Hiroyuki and Takamizawa Kyoko. In fact, he hated them. But he felt even more repulsed by the manner in which Nakajima intended to deal with them. Stop this foolishness. If you'd like, I can make sure the incident is investigated fully and have Kondo expelled. Just stop doing this. While stumbling in the shaking room, Iida desperately reached for the computer's power switch. To prevent him from interfering, Nakajima grabbed his arm with a strength one wouldn't even imagine him displaying normally. However, while the two struggled, the rumbling started to subside. The fluorescent lights lit up with a creaking sound and filled the room with light, and the freezing air about Ida's body dissipated. Where did you go? Why won't you show yourself? Demon, are you going to abandon me? Crying out, Nakajima headed toward the keyboard. Greater than kill, but the host computer's magnetic tape slowly and mercilessly started spinning to a halt. Anxiously opening the program list, Nakajima scanned the details of the program with bloodshot eyes and aimlessly stood as if sapped of all his vitality. My program was perfect. There wasn't a single bug in it. So why did the demon vanish before showing itself? It should have appeared right over there. Leaving the program list open, Nakajima stumbled out of the Kai room as if in a trance. Staring dumbfoundedly at Nakajima's back as he left, Iida finally came to his senses and turned off the power to the computer. I guess it's true how they say that there's a fine line between genius and insanity. That was one hell of an earthquake though, Iida whispered as if trying to purge his memory of the repulsive experience. Chapter 4 The next week, Iida was teaching Nakajima Akemi and Takamizawa Kyoko's class math in the Kai room. Perhaps it was because he was there to witness the failure of the demon summoning, but Nakajima was looking at Iida with a defiant stare. Until now, he would never have acted like this. Trying hard to ignore him, Iida continued his lesson. Now I'm going to have you take an interactive test using the host computer. However, this test won't affect your grades in any way. Through your interaction with the computer, I'd like you to get a little bit more familiar with any weak points you may have. Begin entering your commands as soon as I give the signal. The students all affixed their eyes to their screens and silently started answering the questions given them, as the host computer started diligently recording their individual responses. Once use of Kai spreads, things will get a lot easier for us teachers. Though if it becomes too widespread, the time may come that we teachers aren't needed anymore. Iida carefully watched over his class while relaxing a bit. All of a sudden, as if coming from the depths of the earth itself, a low, rumbling voice sounded and shook the Kai room. Yod, hey, Vav, hey. The magnetic tape of the host computer started spinning wildly and the screens of the computers in the room started changing rapidly. Eerie colors and strange images flashed on screen, and strange letter-like symbols appeared and disappeared. The students said nothing, but remained transfixed to their screens as if enthralled. Nakajima, this is your doing, isn't it? Come on now, there's nothing wrong with a little mischief once in a while, but there are limits. Twisting his face into a dark scowl, Iida started to walk over to Nakajima's seat, but the moment he started walking, a student in the first row stuck his leg out into the aisle, tripping the teacher and causing him to clumsily fall forward. As Iida tried to get up, 2 more students slammed into his back, pinning him to the ground and twisting his arms behind him. What are you doing? Stop this at once. Taken aback at the sudden hostility of his students, Iida struggled to lift his head up while crying out. The other students, staring ahead with glazed looks as if in a trance, stood up from their seats. 3 male students left the classroom, and the others gradually started to surround Takamizawa Kyoko. Her face drained of color, Kyoko stared dumbfoundedly at her classmates surrounding her. Her tea-like eyes were full of fear, her lips trembling up and down but held shut as if sewn together. A male student with thick glasses touched her chest, and as if freed from a curse, Kyoko leapt up onto the desk. Stay away from me, asshole! Kyoko yelled out desperately, whipping out a razor blade. Held between her thumb and middle finger. Stop, Takamizawa, run, Iida's shaking voice echoed throughout the classroom. But Kyoko merely took a sidelong glance at her restrained teacher, spat, and swung her razor at the student that had touched her. The student's glasses flew off, and his split cheek started oozing fresh blood. But the student did not falter a bit or even try to wipe off the blood, but obstinately grabbed onto Kyoko's left ankle. Let go of me, asshole! The razor slashed open the student's temple, and then lodged into his blood-soaked arm, breaking in two. Taking advantage of Kyoko's surprise, another student grabbed her left ankle, and the 2 students now gripping both her legs raised their arms, hoisting her up in the air and dangling her upside down. Her skirt fell down around her waist, revealing her white legs. Kano Miyuki, one of the most beautiful girls in the school along with Kyoko, walked up, put her face in between Kyoko's legs, and bit into her inner thigh. Bending backward in pain, Kyoko attempted to fight back, flailing her arms around like an animal caught in a trap, her drooping hair swishing wildly around, but several students knelt down by her head and started to twist her neck around. Stop, stop this! As Iida cried out with tears in his eyes, a cold voice spoke. Professor, it's too late. Nakajima, who had been at his computer entering commands the whole time, looked at Iida with a sarcastic smile on his face. Ooh! With a meager cry, Kyoko's legs spasmed 2 or 3 times. Without even attempting to wipe the blood from her face, Miyuki looked up and the 2 students holding Kyoko in the air let go of her legs. As Kyoko's twisted, lifeless body dropped to the floor, the circle of students started to break up, leaving her behind. Right about that time, the door opened, and the three students that had left earlier entered the room, Kondo following behind them. After hearing that Kyoko was being ganged up on and verbally harassed by her classmates, Kondo came with a mind to teach the know-it-alls of the gifted class a lesson. However, the classroom was completely silent, and not at all what he was expecting. The three students led the perplexed Kondo to the center of the room, then quickly moved away. Oh my god! Seeing Kyoko's corpse, Kondo was dumbfounded and words escaped him for a moment. The students in the classroom surrounded him, as if to cut off his path of retreat. At that point, Kondo probably could have got away had he set his mind to it. But with his mind clouded with shock and anger, Kondo didn't realize just how dangerous a position he had walked into. You bastards, what have you done? Who killed Kyoko? His body shuddering in rage, Kondo's furious, bloodshot eyes turned to the students. But the normally meek students, who would usually run away if Kondo merely looked at them, showed no signs of fear, and returned his harsh gaze. There was something seriously strange going on here. At that moment, a groan sounded. Looking in the direction of the voice, Kondo saw Nakajima standing over Iida with his foot pinning the teacher's head to the ground. Nakajima, not even imagining for a moment that such a genius pretty boy could be capable of something like this, Kondo was completely taken aback. Iida called out to him from the back of his throat. Kondo, run, everyone's gone mad. Called back to his senses by the teacher's voice, Kondo howled like a wild animal and charged Nakajima. But right before he reached Nakajima, a dozen students jumped on him and pulled him to the ground. Struggling with all his might, Kondo knocked off the students clinging to them, punching and kicking any that got close. But even with their foreheads split and their ribs shattered, the students picked themselves off the floor as if they felt no pain at all, and fiercely grabbed onto Kondo. One of them picked up a computer monitor and hit him hard in the back of the head with it. Kondo's vision blurred with the shock of the blow and started to stumble, and in that instant, the students pulled him to the floor again and restrained his limbs. Shit, let me go. I'll kill you. Looking at Kondo vainly struggling against the students, trying to get free, Nakajima's handsome face twisted into a cold smile. Actually, you're the only one who's going to be killed here. I was hoping to have Kyoko be your executioner, but as you've seen, she's already died. So I've been nice enough to have Miyuki do the job for her. You should thank me. Cradling his chin in his hand as if in thought, Miyuki kneeled down near Kondo and brought her face close to his, her chin still covered in Kyoko's blood. Her warm breath caressed his cheek. Kon's body stiffened up and shivered a bit, and in that instant, the knife in Miyuki's hand flashed and was drenched in crimson. A gurgling cry came out of Kondo's severed windpipe, and with his eyes still open, his head folded backward with a sickening crunch. Now then, Professor. Nakajima crouched down and looked into Iida's face. What do you think, Professor? You see, my demon summoning experiment wasn't a failure. That day, a demon really did appear, inside the Kai host computer. We just didn't realize it. When I was in class here in the Kai room yesterday, the demon sent me a message. Kill. I understood. He can't escape from the computer, so he used group hypnosis to control the class. By the way, Professor, I promised to give 3 souls to the demon. Kyoko's, Kondo's, and one other. For an instant, Nakajima's eyes glittered with an emotion like pity. But as if to suppress it, he pressed his lips together and stood up. Wait, please wait. As Iida desperately wheezed and struggled, 10 students dragged their feet along the floor, slowly approaching him. Chapter 1 After many days of rain, the sun finally showed its face one June morning. The muddy water collected in puddles on the street reflected its rays like little mirrors. Shirasagi Yumiko narrowed her eyes a little bit and gazed at the 3-story school building, which shimmered a bit like a mirage, wrapped in the haze created by the vapor from the evaporating water on the ground. Shirasagi Yumiko. Her long, slender limbs made her image seem appropriate to her name, which meant, white heron. Her inquisitive red-brown eyes, which reflected her keen intellect, and her well-shaped nose gave her all the qualities of a natural beauty. However, it could be argued that her propensity for mischief kept her from being as mature as an ordinary high school senior. Yumiko's transfer to this school had been quite sudden. Only 2 months earlier, her father, who had worked for a major electronics firm, had been transferred from the branch office in Sapporo to the main office in Tokyo. As the daughter of a salaryman, Yumiko had gotten used to frequent moves, but this was a bad time for a major change. Next spring she would be taking her college entrance examinations. She had wanted to spend her last year of high school with the friends she had made, and it was hard to give that up. But after a lot of indecision and hard thought, the entire family had decided to move together, mostly on her mother's insistence that it's too dangerous for either you or your father to live alone. But only 2 days after having transferred to Jusho High, Yumiko quickly started to regret giving in to her mother. I don't like the mood here. Yumiko's admission test to the school had demonstrated that her abilities put her in the top tier of the gifted class. Her parents were quite relieved and happy at her scores, but Yumiko felt that this school had an unnatural coldness that she just could put her finger on. Her former school in Sapporo had also been quite a prestigious institution, but there was no sort of artificial separation between gifted and general classes, and the students there just seemed to be individually enjoying their life as high school students more. In stark contrast, the students of Jusho High had the air of old hermits who had altogether given up on life. The gifted class simply went through the curriculum like machines, as if being programmed to pass their college entrance exams. Even though the general class had its share bright and talented students, many of them had lost their will because of the way that they were passed over by the administration, in favor of the students in the gifted class. Everyone knew their place in the organization, and nobody attempted to break that mold. Part 1, Night of Demons. Come to think of it, she hadn't spoken a word yet, outside of her general introduction to the class. That alone was tough for Yumiko to stand, as she had never been the quiet type. However, she didn't feel any real hostility toward herself from the faculty or students. The entire class was eerily silent, as if being awkwardly suppressed by some sort of invisible force. During free periods, not a single one of Yumiko's classmates had said so much as a word to her. If you're too popular right from the beginning, people will start to keep an eye on you, and you don't want that. That was what her mother had laughingly said when Yumiko mentioned the issue to her, and joke or not, the comment had hurt her pride. Inside the school courtyard, the opening bell rang. Drawing in a deep breath and summoning her will together, Yumiko slowly walked toward the school building. The first hour of the day was classical Japanese class. The professor, Ohara, was quite a beauty. She wasn't wearing much in the way of makeup, probably due to work regulations, but her tall height, style, and face, which looked attractive even to the eyes of other women, was such so that she could probably easily make it as a model. But the dull, toneless voice in which she read the text, combined with the monotonous translate classical to colloquial manner in which she conducted the class, could hardly be said to be attractive, even as insincere flattery. Yumiko had been desperately suppressing yawns all class long. In the Ai's Monogatari, there is a Tonka poem. In the Uzu Mountains of Saruga, I will not meet you in reality or in a dream. In the past it has come up 3 times in Keio University's entrance exam, and also in Waseda University's exam, so you should memorize it. Ignoring all cultural significance of the poem, Ohara started talking about entrance exams. So much for romance and mystique of the Ai's Monogatari. Ariwara Narihira must be rolling over in his grave. Getting downright irritated by the class, and nearly on the brink of being overcome by drowsiness, Yumiko noticed a rhythmical sound behind her, like that of a plastic sheet being tapped. Turning her head, she saw a handsome male student diagonally behind her to the right, typing on the keyboard of a handheld computer that sat atop his desk. She recalled his name as being Nakajima Akemi. Yumiko had been introduced to him along with all the other students the day before, but their names and faces had gotten all mixed up so she couldn't clearly remember everyone. But Nakajima's profile and name were both rather feminine, so his image had stuck in her head. Though he had completely ignored her when she had intially bowed her head in greeting. Well, he's pretty obviously ignoring class. He's got guts. For some reason, Yumiko felt some affinity for this particular classmate. It doesn't look like he's playing a game. Is he writing a program or something? As if taking a break, Nakajima stretched his back and looked up slightly. His almond eyes looked around, and unexpectedly his gaze met Yumiko's. After his successful test of the demon summoning program, it seemed as if Nakajima's nature had changed from the very roots. Or perhaps his true, formerly sealed off demonic nature had been released and consumed the old Nakajima. 2 months ago, his handsome face had only shown weakness, but now it emanated a powerful aura of pure ego. But what surprised Yumiko when their gaze met was not his powerful presence, but rather something else. Deja vu. I didn't realize it yesterday, but I think I've seen this guy somewhere before, like from a long time ago. Geez, I wonder why that is. A wave of emotion like awe coursed through Yumiko's body. Despite Yumiko staring at him, Nakajima displayed no interest in her and returned to typing on his keyboard rhythmically. As if staring into a deep ravine, Yumiko was struck with a strange sense of loss. Ms. Shirasagi, what are you looking at? Ohara's somewhat irritated voice pulled Yumiko back to reality. Looking up, she noticed the Tonka poem written on the blackboard in white chalk had been annotated with red and yellow markings. What does the Yutsutsu in this Tonka indicate? Explain. Yumiko felt the gaze of all the students in the class fall on her, as if testing her. The dull sound of Nakajima typing monotonously, and flagrantly, on the keyboard was the only sound in the room. Yes, ma'am, it indicates the name of the place, Uzu, and the meaning of the word, Yutsutsu, itself, which is, reality. Yumiko's voice sounded slightly nervous. But Ohara's question was an extremely easy one, especially for someone like Yumiko, who was aiming to be a literary historian. I see you've studied well, Ms. Shirasagi, but sometimes what I'm saying will come in handy too. Ohara's expression softened a bit with her sarcastic warning. The momentary tension in the classroom dispersed, and as if being pulled in by Ohara's smile, the male students all grinned. Yumiko got the sense that the entire class was mocking her. The class bell rang. Excuse me, Professor, Nakajima called out to the teacher, stopping her just as she was about to leave. Ohara turned around, her eyes clearly full of apprehension. Yumiko, the unusual relationship between the two. The professor is afraid of Nakajima. Professor, you're coming tonight like we planned, right? Nakajima stayed seated at his desk, idly playing with the keys on his handheld computer. Ohara's face seemed to turn slightly red. Okay, I'll see you in the Kai room, she replied delicately. Nakajima smiled, nodded, and waved to her. Gaping at the two in surprise, Nakajima's behavior seemed to Yumiko as if he was saying, "Good girl, now go away." But this strange relationship between professor and student didn't seem to bother her classmates in the least, who indifferently prepared for their next class. Overcome with curiosity, Yumiko waited for Ohara to leave the classroom and walked over to Nakajima's desk. Hey, Nakajima, Yumiko spoke to him, not really sure of what she was going to say. Nakajima looked up at her dubiously. Being watched by those eyes full of a strange devilishness, Yumiko was struck once again by a strange sense of déjà vu. I can't shake the feeling I've met you somewhere before. Why, while that was what Yumiko really wanted to ask, that kind of question would probably just confuse him. Yumiko struggled to try and figure out what to do with this new, strange sensation. You know, Nakajima opened his mouth and spoke as if teasing a small child. I think you'd be better off staying away from me. No, With that response, Yumiko was unprepared with what to say next. At a seat further back, a stern and tough-looking male student's expression and hand movements signaled to Yumiko that she should probably leave Nakajima alone. The classroom bell rang. The physics teacher for the second hour of class had at some point entered the room and was already standing at the head of the class. You can go ahead and ignore me if you want. I want to know what's up with you, and it's my right to try and find out. Returning to her seat and enduring the thoughts and feelings welling up from the depths of her soul, Yumiko bit down on her lower lip with her well-shaped front teeth. Chapter 2. Later that day at 7 p.m., Yumiko stood concealed in the shadows of the schoolyard, watching the Kai room carefully. An uncomfortably warm breeze struck her, carrying with it swarms of irritating insects that refused to leave her alone. The full moon showed itself from a break in the clouds, and illuminating the gloomy, flat-roofed separate building that housed the Kai room. I feel like an idiot, a high school senior playing detective. Yumiko smiled bitterly while carefully observing the silent, empty Kai room. Yumiko asked herself just why she was out here doing this. Yumiko was pretty sure that Nakajima had said, "tonight." It just wasn't normal for a student to call a female teacher to the Kai room in the middle of the night. Of course, it was probably none of her business what the two of them would be doing there. However, after seeing Ohara's nearly drunken gait as she left the classroom, Yumiko had been very upset, and was overwhelmed with the urge to find out what the relationship between the two were. Thus she had been hiding here all afternoon long. Is this love at first sight? No, that was too hasty a conclusion to make. Yeah, right. Yumiko could not deny that Nakajima had a very unique appeal to him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was drawn to him on some sort of deeper connection, on a level beyond an ephemeral, love or hate, sort of emotion. The arms of the clock passed 9 p.m., and just as Yumiko's arms and legs were starting to fall asleep, the silhouette of a person passed through the connecting hallway and entered the Kai room. Yumiko's body stiffened in nervousness. Presently a light went on inside the Kai room, and through the glass of the window, the outlines of several people moving about the room were faintly visible. But before Yumiko's heart even had a chance to start racing, the shadow of a very large man approached the window, and in an instant, all the blinds were lowered. It would appear that Ohara and Nakajima were not the only people meeting tonight. The mystery only deepened, and Yumiko, overcome with curiosity, decided to move from the rear of the schoolyard to the Kai room to get a better look. Right as Yumiko left her former watchpoint, Ohara stealthily approached the Kai room, opened the door slightly, and slipped inside. The room was lit up brilliantly, and 3 students arrived to greet her. The 3 of them were garbed in black robes. One of them reverently carried a silver platter, and the other 2 carried DS and candlesticks. The desk in the center of the room that normally sported several computers had been removed, and in its place was a leather sofa. Nakajima Akemi was sitting on that sofa, deep in meditation. A large circle divided into 12 sections like a horoscope was drawn on the floor, with the sofa situated in the center. At 4 places inside the circle were astrological symbols representing the moon, sun, Mars, and Pluto. Hello, and welcome. Realizing Ohara's arrival, Nakajima stopped his meditation and slowly stood up. As he left the sofa, the several belts attached to it on the backrest, arms and base, belts expressly designed to bind a person down, became clearly visible. However, even seeing this, Ohara displayed no signs of fear, and in fact her expression even calmed a bit. Smiling and nodding, Nakajima ordered the 3 students to turn out the room lights and ignite the candles. They obediently followed his orders. As if enthralled by the mysterious aura the now dark room seemed to hold, Ohara knelt on the ground in front of Nakajima. Nakajima's white, translucent hand touched Ohara's flushed cheek. Come, relax a bit. In just a few minutes, the demon Loki will arrive. Loki is well known for his beauty and mischievousness, a perfect match for you, Professor. Nakajima spoke in a voice that had a composed, sweet sound, one that could melt the heart of any person. As Nakajima's hand slid from Ohara's cheek to the nape of her neck, her breath became deep and heavy. It's time to turn on the host computer. There's no need to worry, Professor. I'm sure that you will satisfy the demon. Whispering in Ohara's ear, Nakajima stepped away and entered a command into a nearby terminal. Beyond the thick plate glass, the reels of magnetic tape slowly started to turn. Nakajima picked up his handheld computer and entered a quick command. A white haze appeared from the liquid crystal display and began expanding before seeping out the doorway. As soon as it disappeared from view, the low growl of a beast sounded throughout the outside hallway, enough to send tremors of fear into the bowels of all within earshot. It was Kerberos, a digital beast summoned from the Absolute world and given form by Nakajima. He was to perform the role of guardian for tonight's ceremony. Meanwhile, the 3 students in the room led Ohara to the sofa and fastened her firmly to the seat using the leather belts. Come, steady your breathing. Concentrate your spirit, and call forth the demon from the Absolute world. Click, click. As if impatient, the sound of the terminal's disk drive echoed throughout the room. The moon and Mars are opposite each other, and so are Sun and Pluto, forming the Grand Cross in the heavens. No night could be as perfect as this to summon a demon. Speaking as if chanting a spell, Nakajima took a helmet-like device from the machine room and placed it on Ohara's head. It was a brainwave modem helmet. It digitized human brainwaves, and acted as an interface to directly communicate with the computer. 2 long cables extended from the back of the helmet by the base of the head, one red and one black. The red cable connected to the host computer, and the black one connected to one of the terminals in the room. Nakajima entered a command on the terminal, and the magnetic tapes started to spin rapidly. Ohara's body started twitching slightly, as if her consciousness was already blending into someone inside the host. A pungent musky spell wafted up from somewhere, enveloping her. The faces of the three students watching over the ceremony with glazed over, unfocused eyes, lit up with an expression like awe. Yod, hey, Vav, hey. The instant the low, rumbling voice sounded from the machine room, Ohara let out a cry and started twisting her body about. As she continued to scream intermittently, her eyes opened wide with fear, staring emptily into space. The legs of the sofa started to come off the floor as Ohara twisted her limbs as if trying to escape from something, stretching the cables connected to her helmet. The leather straps binding her ground against her wrists, breaking the skin and staining the belts black with oozing blood. But the expression of panic on Ohara's face soon dissipated, her face became calm, and she closed her eyes. Her mouth turned up at the corners into a smile, even though her bottom lip was still bleeding from where she had bitten down on it. I see you've succeeded in taking in Ohara, Loki. Now, what are you going to do with her? Nakajima looked into the display of the computer connected to the modem helmet. The digital modem helmet had taken Ohara's thoughts and sensations, digitized them, and sent them into the world that virtual Loki had created in the host computer. One could say that her earlier pain had just been a temporary autonomous rejection reaction when her digitized nervous system initially came into contact with that of the demon. Nakajima looked into the display of the computer, hoping to get a glimpse of the world that was currently being fed into Ohara's visual cortex. All of a sudden, Kerber's angry roar echoed throughout the corridor outside. In reaction to Nakajima's gesture, the two stern students carrying swords started moving toward the door. Shortly after Ohara had entered the Kai room, Yumiko moved from the rear of the schoolyard to the hallway that connected the outlying building with the rest of the school. She slowly walked along the corridor, using the reflected moonlight off the linoleum floor as a guide. From a crack in the blinds by the dark end window, a slight flickering light was visible, most likely from candlelight. Stop this foolishness. Let's just go home, take a shower, and forget all this. Yumiko's normal instincts anxiously tried to persuade her. But tonight, there was another Yumiko pulling the strings. What are you so afraid of? This is our chance to find out what's up with Nakajima. Like all other girls her age had done at least once or twice, Yumiko obeyed her more daring, curious voice. From the Kai room, she could hear the sound of a far-off cry, like sobbing. The instant Yumiko's heart started racing, something suddenly crawled out of the darkness right in front of her. Before she had a chance to even react, the moon broke through the clouds, illuminating the form of a terrible beast. Its body was larger than even a lion, and its huge mouth, which practically looked like it took up half its body, had 2 rows of long, sharp fangs. Its eyes glared at Yumiko, shining like a flame, and the metallic feelers growing out of its head near the ears moved around as if trying not to let a single tiny change in the area escape them. Its burly shoulders and thick body were striped like a tiger, and its heavy-looking tail was plated with snake-like scales. It was the digital beast, Kerberos. Breathing out a puff of air that had the stench of bloody meat on the petrified Yumiko, the beast roared. Yumiko's stomach twisted so powerfully that she felt almost as if her intestines were being gouged out, and her vision blurred. Unable to withstand the shock, she passed out. Yumiko was brought to her senses by the sensation of an unusual heat, and the sound of intermittent panting. The surrounding area was dim and gloomy, and the only thing she felt was one of her cheeks pressed to the cool ground. Oh, right. That monster. As Yumiko sat upright, Ohara, bound to a leather chair, entered her field of vision. She was wearing a strange helmet and breathing heavily. Next to her, Nakajima was staring at a computer display, an eerily cold smile on his handsome face. Nakajima, as Yumiko blurted out her surprise, someone grabbed her right shoulder. Yumiko gulped back her words as she looked around. Standing behind her was Takai Kenichi. Normally Takai was weak-willed and reasonable, but now he looked at her with a hollow stare as if almost possessed by something, and Yumiko certainly didn't think he knew where he was or could even recognize her. Furthermore, there were 2 other students garbed in black robes in the room, standing still with a look like sleepwalkers. At that moment, Ohara's heavy breathing got stronger. Furiously panting and writhing her body around, she was giving off a ghastly aura that seemed as if it would pollute the soul of anyone that came close to her. Yumiko cried out. What is this? What have you done to the teacher? Takai tried to force Yumiko to the ground, but Nakajima slowly raised his hand to stop him. At his signal, Takai's strong hand stiffly moved away from Yumiko's shoulder. Shirasagi Yumiko, was it? Come in. Have a look at this. It's fascinating. As Yumiko stood up, she noticed that part of her skirt was torn, as if a dog had bitten it. At that moment, she realized that the beast she had seen earlier was all too real. Nakajima pointed to the screen of the terminal connected to Ohara's helmet by a cable. There on screen was a magnificent bronze statue of a youth, like an ancient Greek sculpture. No, it couldn't be a sculpture. The divinely beautiful image was calmly moving, as if life had been breathed into it. The image zoomed into a view of the youth's head and chest. His expression displayed an intellect beyond anything a human could hope to have, and his jet black eyes looked almost like two black holes that would absorb everything they gazed on. That's the demon Loki, Nakajima spoke into Yumiko's ear. This is just CG, isn't it? Yumiko's eyes remained glued to the screen. If I could think up a demon this realistic and draw it, I wouldn't have to go to school in the first place. No, this is a real demon. Though I imagine you won't believe that. Loki flexed his muscular chest on screen. It was shining black, and covered with scales. At that moment, Yumiko noticed that Ohara's gasps were in perfect sync with Loki's movements. The next instant, she realized what that meant and gasped. That's right, Professor Ohara and Loki are having a little fun together right now. In the virtual world, that is. For some reason Nakajima spat out the words as if slightly upset. Ohara was getting closer and closer to orgasm. Her heaving chest, covered in sweat, was visible through her open blouse. Her body had entirely accepted the invisible demon in the virtual world. At that moment, Yumiko noticed a faint blue haze floating about the area of Ohara's chest. Furthermore, that haze was increasing in thickness, and an unbearable stench assaulted her nostrils. Looking confused, Nakajima knelt in front of Ohara with his handheld computer in one hand, typing on the keyboard while waving a sensor rod around the area. As Ohara cried out and lost consciousness, the blue haze dissipated. Nakajima let out a deep sigh of relief. In his expression, Yumiko sensed a faltering of his normally rock-solid confidence. Nakajima was not a magician. Had he been one, he would surely have known how important it was to iron out a purpose and duration of service when negotiating a contract with a demon. However, Nakajima had neglected that. When Loki turned Kondo, Takamizawa and Iida into bloody lumps of flesh, he had been deluded into believing that he had become a great ruler of some sort. Loki's power was tremendous. Taking the subconscious respect that the students and teachers had for Nakajima and nurturing it with his power, he made the men obey him and the women fawn over him. For a formerly powerless high school student, it was a dream come true. Loki demanded female sacrifices. Those offered to him would groan, contort, and eventually reach orgasm. Perhaps deep in his subconscious, Nakajima took a sadistic glee in violating women. But he had always thought that what went on was not for real, as it only took place in a virtual world. Loki could not escape from the computer. Unless one used the world's most powerful